Hello and welcome everyone to our threat hunting workshop. Now this is going to be a little different than we normally do, where we're not focusing on a MITRE ATT&CK tactic. We're actually focusing on different perspectives on where to start on our threat hunting process. So the main three that I like to think about is, are we focusing on APT? Are we focusing on malware? Or are we focusing on a tool set that the threat actors can use? Now, these three different perspectives can be used in conjunction with focusing on MITRE ATT&CK tactics, techniques, and sub-techniques, but it all boils down to the same thing, where we're looking for behaviors instead of indicators of compromise. We'll find the IOCs along the way, but what we really want to focus on is the human aspect of the threat hunting process. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, there's like 30 or 40,000 APTs out there. How do we decide which one we want to look for? Well, that comes down to your individual instance, your individual organizations, or really your cybersecurity posture. So that's your decision to make. But things I would think about are, what industry am I in? What are my crown jewels? And what does a threat actor have to gain if they conduct a cyber attack on our organization? Now, that could be, if you are in the government, it's probably intel. So it's like an espionage, and you can start thinking about APT groups that like to conduct espionage campaigns. Or if you have proprietary information, for example, the greatest example or most commonly used is Coca-Cola. If someone is going to try to steal the Coca-Cola recipe, that goal is proprietary information. If it's just cybercrime, which kind of leads into ransomware, but if the goal is just to attack you and hold you down and make money from you and extort you, then you have a lot of other APTs out there that do that. But you have to figure out where you fall in this algorithm. So how do we do that? And now that we have our understandings, how can we leverage the Hunter platform to help us with this goal? Well, that's what I'm here to show you. Let's get going. To help you with your APT hunt, we can come straight to the Hunter platform, and we're going to leverage the filters on the left-hand side. So as we scroll down, we find under the contextual tagging a actors filter. So once we drop that down, we have a list of the APTs that we have packages that cover. So we're just going to jump in, use APT 29 as an example, and we can see the first hunt package that's available to us is Run DLL 32, or Command Executing Application from Explorer, Potential Malware Execution Chain. And this is the one we're going to use. So before we continue, you may be asking yourself, what is a hunt package? Well, a hunt package is a whole collection of data that we've used to create our query for you to use in your environment. Now, what I mean by that is, during the process of creating the queries, we've used open source intelligence, we've used tweets, we've analyzed malware. Whatever the case may be, we have that research. But what we didn't want to do is tell you to, hey, trust us, believe in us, we got this. So what we did is we provided all the information and all the contextual information in one spot. So if you look at the overview, we have a description of what this hunt package is designed. We've tagged it so that if you are looking for certain things or MITRE ATT&CK tactics or techniques, you can filter on those. As you can see, we're focusing on actors or the actor APT 29, so that's highlighted. So it gives you a way to move around and filter things out that you're really concerned about while still getting all the information in a one-stop shop. So we have emulation and validation. So if you conduct things in that type of activity where you emulate the attack on a lab machine, hopefully it's a lab machine, not in production, please don't do that, then you can do that in your environment to validate this query. We also provide the query logic table, which breaks it down into a human readable form. And then most importantly, or just as important, we provide all the research that we've conducted. Our amazing analysts out there take many, many hours to complete these and contextualize these so that we're not wasting that research and once again being a black box and saying, believe us. We also provide the references so that if there is something you're interested in seeing, you can go to that actual source that we used, and then MITRE ATT&CK and some response actions. So all this information and the query itself is what we like to call our hunt packages. And the biggest value add from these hunt packages is that it saves you time. All this information that we've gathered, like I said, we're not wasting it. We're not holding off just in our notes, but we're giving it to you so that you can save time and understand what you're looking for right here. But enough about that. Now it's time for the threat hunting. So we're going to jump in, and this time we're going to use Splunk as our SIEM. What we can do is drop down here, and we're going to figure out what log source we want to use. And I'm going to use sysmon. So all I'm going to do is click copy, and we're going to drop this query into Splunk and let it go. All right, so here we are in Splunk, and we've dropped our query into the search bar, and you can see that we have results right away in the last 24 hours. Now, the thing you want to do first, before raising that red flag and launching a whole investigation, is to say, you know what? Is this, or are my results returning the same criteria that I'm actually looking for? Just because the query is there and you have results, it doesn't always mean it's a true positive. So what you want to do is come back to the Hunter platform and read that description again. What are we looking for? So we're looking for run DLL or command.exe, launching a malicious DLL or Explorer from Explorer. It gives you an idea that, they're looking for a window or link file, executing a program. That's what this could be. And really, if you come back down to the query logic table, we can see that the parent process is Explorer. These are the processes that we're looking for in the process path fields, and the command line arguments are here. So now we have an idea that we're looking for Explorer as the parent. We have any of those child processes and any of those values in the command line argument field. So we can come back to Splunk, take a look at this, and determine, is this capturing the activity that we think it is? So as you see, our parent process paths are Explorer, so that checks out. We check the command line arguments. We see command.exe/c start, and we see the image being syswow64 command.exe. Just one last validation, coming back to query logic table, we see that command.exe is one of the processes we're looking for, and we see the command.exe/start. So we're on our way. We know that we actually have some hits, and this query has been validated. Now what? The biggest question is, now what? Where do we go from here? What I like to do is I like to pick out an interesting artifact from the data that has been returned and pivot off of that. So when I mean pivot, I mean we're just going to continue our investigation focusing on that artifact that we chose. Now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to manipulate the query a bit so that we can use it or we can change it to focus on the artifact that we decided on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to focus on AnyDesk being the parent image or the image, basically sysmon's way of saying parent process, which is parent image, and image is child process. So AnyDesk as the parent or child process. So I'm going to grab this query and we're going to run it. Now it looks like a very basic query. It's index sysmon. We're looking at a certain device, which is desktop 2BB. And then, like I said, we set the parent image or the parent process as anydesk.exe, or the image or the child process as anydesk.exe. And all we're doing is sorting it by event code, and we're looking for the counts. What this does is it provides you multiple paths to continue your investigation. So we saw that AnyDesk was executed and spawned by explorer.exe, but we didn't see anything after that. So that's what we're trying to figure out. What is next? So by doing this, we're saying, all right, after AnyDesk triggered or executed, what event codes are associated with that activity? So we have event code 1, which is process create. We have event code 22, which is DNS activity. We have 5, which is process terminated, 3, which is network connections, and then 11 is a file being created. So we have all these different things that are associated with anydesk.exe. Now we get to choose where we go from here. Now I'm going to focus on the processes being created because I want to see where that process chain goes. Now, You might choose something different because you are you're comfortable or familiar with something else. But this is how I'm going to demonstrate it. I'm going to focus on those processes being created. So I'm going to whip up a query where it's the same thing. All we've done was we've added event code 1, which is the process create. And now we're looking at some different fields that are related to process create. So we've added the image, we've added command line fields, and we're sorting it by parent image and parent command line. So all this does, and if you're not familiar with Splunk, all this stats and this transform command does is it creates a table that you can sort by and manipulate the data in a user-friendly way to read it. As you can see, it's breaking it down by event. We're seeing the parent image and the parent command line. So we're seeing what these are and what values they produce. And then we're seeing the other events that are related to it as well. So this first event as an example, we see AnyDesk triggered. The parent command line is simply the AnyDesk executable in the absolute path. But we see that the child processes are command.exe and notepad. Then we also see some more command line arguments where we see who am I and then notepad.exe. So really we can see that AnyDesk is now spawning different processes. So we've moved from the initial finding of Explorer executing AnyDesk, and now we're following, hey, what did AnyDesk create or spawn? We also have, our times, so we can take a look at how often did this happen? Did it happen more than once? And really, this date range, it allows hunters and incident responders to get a better idea of where am I searching for and what time frame. It also helps build in the reporting part of it to say, we saw AnyDesk trigger at this time, which led to command and notepad triggering at this time. It gives everyone a better idea of the timeline of the attack, which always helps clarify things, especially if you need to pass it on to other organizations or you need to continue the investigation on different devices in your environment. So you could say, we saw AnyDesk trigger, but then we saw command.exe trigger 5 minutes later, or so on. But really, we're gathering a lot of information at this point as threat hunters because we don't have all the answers. What we're trying to do is figure out, all right, what happened next? Document it. What happened next? Document it. After we have all that documentation, we can go through and research it, or we can have other team members researching as we go to say, this is what that command line argument means. Just an example, if you look at command.exe/c, you can say, well, what is /c? Why am I seeing that? And someone researches and says, hey, that's just the parameter that says we're going to execute code that's after it. Okay, well, what about who am I /groups? What does that do? And someone can research and say, AnyDesk triggered command.exe, which eventually triggered or executed who am I, which is a discovery process. So, threat actors are trying to figure out who they are, what privileges they have, what groups they're in. So they're trying to learn about your environment so they know where to go next. So once again, sorry about that rant, but what we're doing now is we've found AnyDesk information. We found it executing a process, which is Notepad, which seems suspicious in any right. So all we're going to do is we're going to take that Notepad artifact and we're going to treat it just like we did with AnyDesk, and we're setting it as the parent process and we're setting it as the child process to see what artifacts we can find. All right, so now we have some more activity. We see the AnyDesk event that we actually pivoted off of. But what's interesting is before that, we see Notepad being spawned by 2 other processes that don't really go along with the normal naming convention. If you look at them, and I'm talking about these 2 events right here, we see an ndeq.exe and an up.exe. So we have 2 randomly named executables that are both spawning Notepad before AnyDesk is spawning Notepad. And let me double check that. Nope, I'm wrong. I got my times messed up. But either way, we have all these random executables executing Notepad. For what reason? I don't know, but let's figure this out. Because as we scroll down, we see Notepad has now been promoted to the parent, which tells us that not only is AnyDesk executing Notepad, but there's follow-on activity as well. We're just following that train, or that chain, not train. But we have notepad.exe as the parent. Over here, we have the image or the process that it's opening or executing, and we see PowerShell and command.exe. So further activity, and we see that there's a shutdown request. We see PowerShell being run. All this information. But once again, the flags and the artifacts that we're picking up are getting a little more interesting. It's not really starting to make sense, especially with Notepad being spawned by AnyDesk, but then Notepad spawning PowerShell. What this kind of tells me is that when you see interesting or suspicious activity from an executable that it doesn't really make sense, it would seem to me that this is a instance of process injection, or injecting, or a piece of malware injecting themselves into a legitimate process and then making it do things that it's not designed to. I don't know how many times you've executed the shutdown command from Notepad, but personally, not a lot. So how do we continue this investigation? We're going to just keep going down the process path, and we're going to set or create a query that gets a little more complex, but is the same idea. So we have parent image, or the parent process, being command.exe or PowerShell, or the image being command.exe or PowerShell. So the reason we did this is that we saw down here where Notepad is spawning PowerShell and command.exe. So I want to see what further activity exists beyond this. I'm going to add one thing here. I'm going to say sort event times. All that's going to do is that's going to take the earliest up top and put the latest on the bottom, or I guess most recent. All right, so we have some more activity. We see command.exe issuing the shutdown command, which is strange because we see command.exe. So it looks like a nested behavior, which has been seen in the wild. Then we see command.exe executing ping. So another discovery process. Can I reach out from this computer that I've compromised? What are my capabilities? Then through PowerShell, we see scheduled task as the child process. What does that mean? Well, they've got a foothold, or they've compromised a machine. The next step is they want to create a foothold and gain persistence so that they can gain access to your machine over and over and over, and in their case, hopefully without you noticing. So by creating this scheduled task, possibly they can get whatever they want executed to execute depending on their whatever trigger they want. Is it going to be log on? Is it going to be on idle? Is it going to be minute, hourly, daily? All those questions can be actually answered by the command line arguments. So if we take a look at it, we have the scheduled task.exe. The /create tells me that this is being created. And then we have /tn, which is task name, which is auto connect, /tr, which is the task command that is going to execute. And what we see is command.exe /c and that anydesk.exe. So we see this executable being pointed to and saying, we're going to execute this. And their schedule is by the minute. And they're going to do it every 2 minutes, which seems a lot. Don't know why they would do that every 2 minutes. This isn't common. This is the emulation side. But they're also running it at the highest level. So if they can gain system level privileges, when they run this, they can already have, or they can have already gained and achieved privilege escalation simply by running this program at the highest level of the system level. That tells us what's going on here, that they're gaining persistence. They're trying to reach out. They're trying to have that beacon out every 2 minutes so that they can be listening and possibly connect whenever it reaches out. Next, we have some more command.exe. So we see mv.exe, which simply moves files around. We see netstat, command, ftp, and so on. So all these artifacts that are listed here, we can always use to figure out what are they doing. What are they trying to achieve? So netstat, ipconfig, system info, who am I? Those are all commands you can throw or executables you can use to gather more information about the environment. Then we see some registry information by reg.exe. If we come down here, we can see that they're saying reg save, which saves the configuration or saves the hive that you're looking at, or the registry key. And you see it's HKLM, so local machine, and system, SAM, and security. So they're trying to save the system, SAM, and security, which is a common technique whenever they need to extract information from it. So what they're probably going to do is save the system, SAM, and security hives to the local or the compromised computer, exfil them out of the network, and then try to gain information to possibly use, pass the hash. I believe Mimikatz can use that, or you can use Mimikatz to help with that information. But they're still trying to gain further foothold in your environment. So they're just using all these tools to figure out how can I continue to gain access and how can I reach my goals and achieve them. And we can keep going as we see there's more information. So we see shutdown, we see xcopy, we see a screensaver.bat. So all this information just from pivoting off of anydesk.exe. So we started with the Explorer being the parent image, and we've explored this whole source of data, and we're only a piece of the puzzle. We've only explored the event code process create, or the process create event types. There's still all those other event codes that we haven't even looked at. So what I'm going to do is we're actually going to jump back, and just to remind everyone what this looked like, we're looking at index being sysvon, desktop 2BB, the parent image as AnyDesk, and we're sorting it by event code, just counting it. So what we can do now is, now that we learned how to move through a hunt, looking at the process create event type, now we can look at something different. So we saw AnyDesk creating some network connections, which is the event code 3, which is what I want to explore now. So we're going to come over here. We're going to add event code equals 3. And then we're going to add some fields, values, destination, IP. There we go. So all we're adding is the field, or we want to see the values in the fields destination IP, destination port, and source IP, and we're sorting that by image. Once again, sorting by count. So what this tells me, and gives me a better idea of, is when event code 3 is related to AnyDesk, this is the IP that it's reaching out to. So 10.10.30.98. And this is the port that it's reaching out over, which is 7575. So we have all this suspicious process create activity that was going on. But now we're trying to figure out, how do we tie this into network connections being made? So we have the process create, and now we have the network connections. And we know AnyDesk is reaching out on destination port 7575, which is a non-standard port. I don't know if there's an actual protocol that's tied to that port, but what we can assume now is this is why the threat actor created that scheduled task that we saw. Why did they create that scheduled task to run every 2 minutes? Because they wanted AnyDesk to reach out to 10.10.30.98, which could be another compromised machine. It could be a rogue device in your environment, or it could be their external machine that they're trying to reach out to so that they can continue their attack. But the idea is, we have this artifact being destination port 7575 that provides more context. As a threat hunter, our job is to find these artifacts interpret what's going on, and then tie them together and say, this is the whole picture. This is my logic. This is what we found, and this is what we think it means. And we've done our research. This is the supporting data to say, hey, we think that AnyDesk was their backdoor. They created a scheduled task for it to trigger, and it's also reaching out over destination port 7575 to destination IP 10.10.30.98. So if we want to continue our investigation, we can pivot off the destination IP. All we're going to do here is we're going to say destination IP equals 10.10.30.98. And we're going to keep the rest of the fields because I want to see, is there anything else reaching out to 10.10.30.98? What other contextual information can I find? And here we have some answers. We see that we have 4 different processes now. So that n.exe and that up.exe that we saw spawning Notepad. Well, here's some more information about it. It was also reaching out over port, or to the same IP over port 9000. Now we also see TeamViewer in AppData That's also reaching out to the same IP, which is 8675.309. Now, what I know, or what this tells me, is that not only is our AnyDesk a beacon or a backdoor, and they're trying to establish a beachhead there, but that's their main source of persistence. But we have all these other devices or these network connections and processes that might be trying to do the same thing. That if they're executed, they might be reaching out. So not only we're finding evidence and artifacts of compromise, but we're also providing the incident response or the digital forensics team an idea of where you need to go and what needs to be removed, because this is what it's doing. With that, we're actually going to wrap this hunt up. Thank you very much for joining us on this quick 30-minute hunt for APT 29. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can take this information, apply it to your current or new threat hunting process, and I hope it really helps you improve your cybersecurity posture. Well, thank you very much again. I'm Lee Archinal. Have a wonderful day and happy hunting.